However, things didn't quite turn out as planned. Not after Reuben revealed how he had managed to stabilize my situation. There was an entire situation to manage now.
Are you sure you're feeling up to doing this right now?
I'd rather take care of it now than wait. I gave him an apologetic smile as he made a careful left turn. After hearing everything you told me, I agree it's important to solidify my current situation sooner rather than later if possible. Because Reuben had leaked my story to the press, or at least a modified and carefully curated version of it, one he thought would make everyone pause and carefully consider their next actions. Even Endgame, he said, would hesitate to swoop in again if the press was painting them in a poor light over how they managed apprehending me. Ooh, okay. He said he had called in a fair few favors with a few investigative journalists he knew to get them to push the story. I wasn't sure how I felt about it yet, but he said that the most important thing would be to get me solidly in protective custody, then figure the rest out. I agreed.
I was hoping to get you to a doctor before all this. I refreshed myself on the details of psi fatigue while you were resting, and...
I'm fine. At least for now. At the very least, I'm okay enough to prioritize getting all this stuff sorted.
I can tell you are physically feeling better, yes, but... Let me ask you this. Are you very familiar with psi fatigue? Last night, this morning rather, I got the sense you might not be.
If I'm being honest, I spent a lot of time trying to avoid anything to do with Espers. On a good day, I could forget I was one. On a bad day, I'd just be terrified that something like this would happen, I guess. Anyway, no, I'm not, to answer your question.
I'm no doctor, but I'm aware external stress can worsen the condition. That's why, until now, I've been reluctant to force you into a hospital. If you're stressed, it could cause unconscious use of psi or even a power surge. That said, if all you had was a mild case of fatigue, you'd be over it by now. And you're not. So you will go to a clinic later. Promise me.
Alright. Later. But first, we were going to be stopping by the field office where he worked. Ooh. Hello. Well, this is nice. I like it. Reuben's office was a little intimidating. Surprisingly busy. People talking loudly, brushing past us, or sitting at desks working. There were large monitors flashing information and news broadcasts as well. I'd never been to a police office before, but it exactly matched my mental image. Same, just more futuristic. As we passed several large monitors, one broadcast in particular caught my eye right away. I watched, barely aware that Reuben had continued on. The image on the screen was a mangled car wreck and half-collapsed wall in what I recognized as the Solace right away. The anchor was discussing the accident Ari and Caleb orchestrated when they apprehended me, to use Reuben's word.
It's been almost nothing but that since Reuben went public with your story this morning.
Oh, hi. I started, glancing back to find Winter Ashton just behind me. He smiled a little.
Several networks have picked it up at this point.
Reuben said he spun the narrative in my favor, but I'm still not even sure what that means.
It's not that difficult to understand when you think about it. You're a young student with an impeccable record. Someone in one of New Albion's top educational tiers. And you were terrorized by an organization that's supposed to help people. As well as several other less reputable groups. He didn't have to do much spinning, actually.
That story seemed to be ignoring some crucial information, though.
Even if they wanted to, there's not much negative information the press could dig up on you.
Sure. Beyond hiding that I was an Esper in a place where the law said children like me needed to go to Endgame. But I already knew Reuben kept that to himself. And there was no actual evidence I'd known I was an Esper. I was aware, though. I felt a mix of fear and guilt at that. Fear about being asked about it or having it discovered, and guilt for hiding it in the first place. Still, it was strange seeing Endgame condemned like that. Not when everyone was almost always quick to praise them for being the public shield. And this whole thing is because of me.
Damn it, Reuben! You always cause problems for me!
My attention was pulled from the report when one voice carried across the rest of the noise in the room. Across the room, Reuben was being berated by an unfamiliar man.
Philip Castillo, our boss. Don't let the temper fool you, though. He barks a lot, but never bites.
He took my arm and guided me to where Reuben was, though I wasn't sure I wanted to join that conversation. Hello, Philip.
Do you have any idea how many phone calls I've had to field today about this damn situation? I'm not the one responsible for any of this, Phil. I hope you realize that. Yet somehow it managed to fall in your lap because every pain in the ass situation does.
Would that pain in the ass situation be me by any chance? I half expected the tirade to refocus on me, but it did not. Philip calmed when he saw me there.
Ugh. You are the person least responsible for the situation, Miss Leone. You are the victim of a possible Esper crime, not the perpetrator of one. The attack in the vivarium of Sector 1, being chased through whatever god-awful place you were in. A potential abduction attempt by an unknown perpetrator from Delphine, thwarted by Endgame tripping over their own damn feet to prevent it. It's just that somehow it's always this guy that gets tangled in this crap. Don't take Phil too seriously, Morgan. He just likes to give me a hard time. And it's not always me. It is literally always you. That's why
He paused and put a hand to his ear, then shook his head. He gave Reuben a stern look and disappeared through a nearby door without a word.
Another call, I guess.
Is the office always this busy?
Usually. Come on, my desk is over here. I'll be right back, you two.
He disappeared, leaving me to follow Reuben to a messy desk a short distance away.
Winter prepared the documentation and forms while we were on the way here.
He motioned me to a chair in front of which was a small data input device, and he took the one next to it.
Listen, Morgan. There's a lot happening really fast right now regarding your situation, and it's going to be that way for a while. When I decided to go to the press with it, I figured it was the only way to make Endgame step back, but that's going to put a difficult spotlight on you for a while. And we might not be able to fully shield you from it.
Honestly, I still don't understand why Endgame would hesitate from a little negative publicity. They're a Goliath. I'm just one person.
Oh, they prefer to do their dirty deeds in the shadows and only let the public see them in a good light. Like any other big organization. It might seem strange to you, but Endgame is cautious about their reputation. This time they overstepped, and they know it. As Phil said, they tripped over their own feet. And with the story in the public sphere now, that also means they face-planted in front of everyone. They're trying to push the blame for their actions off on other groups like Crimson, the Court. Which has actually helped. Their brief explanations to the powers that be, at least from what I've heard, suggest that they acted with your safety in mind. And everyone else's, of course.
Of course. Acting with everyone's safety in mind usually involves street-side abductions and driving a car into a wall at high speeds.
A street-side collection.
I'm not a rubbish bin.
Of course not. Look, they're going to argue they were taking you into custody in the only way possible. That doesn't mean everyone will buy it. You may not realize this because everyone plays nice out in the open, but plenty of people would love to knock Endgame from their pedestal. Just once. This situation gives them the perfect opportunity. And I knew that would work in our favor. It comes with drawbacks, though. There's a lot of attention on you. Public. Political.
Political?
Well, several triad senators have reached out to us for more information about your situation. I'm sure they want to make a show of speaking against the terrifying ordeal you were put through.
But why?
There is a particular discourse that has become prevalent even in the few hours since your story started circulating, but it's one that's been building for a while. In some places, maybe not New Albion as much yet, but now, suddenly...
What kind of discourse?
About Esper policy in general, Endgame's overreach, national security, and Crimson's influence in the Day territories. The rise in F-class Espers has made some of this a tinderbox already, and you've just become a spark.
I must have looked as concerned as I felt when he said that.
I'm sorry, Morgan. It was the only way I could come up with to avoid being crushed by Endgame. This way, the weight of public opinion acts as your shield to a degree.
Alright, so, we are not cautious. I mean, saying what about my family is kind of dismissing all the work he has done up to this point, so I think I'll just go with, hey, I mean, I was curious, like, what were you going to do to keep her safe from, like, just Ari teleporting in the middle of the night and, like, scoop her up and that's it. It's over, you know? So, I think you did all you could, dude. I'm not complaining about it, just trying to get my head around it all. It's a little weird to suddenly be a potential political pawn.
Well, that's what they want to make you anyway. Or your story. As long as you lie low for now and keep out of the public eye, I'm hoping we can work to get things settled behind the scenes and give you better standing here.
You sound almost used to navigating this sort of thing.
I wouldn't say I'm used to it, but we do our fair share of it dealing with the media and annoying politicians. And Endgame.
Is it really possible to keep Endgame at bay with something like this?
Well, I don't know. It's the first time I've tried it. Still, Endgame isn't the paragon of justice they try to present, but they definitely want to be seen that way so people don't question what they do. They operate above the law purely based on their actions being for the public good. Anything that highlights how much public harm they're doing tends to send them running for Cor Solaris. Grabbing students off the street, intentionally damaging public property, instigating a fight in an abandoned sector, putting your life in danger. None of this upholds that whole peacekeeper reputation.
They didn't instigate that fight, you know. Ugh, I can't believe I'm defending them.
Maybe not, but they still participated in it, and, by doing so, exposed the civilian to a dangerous situation. It makes it look like they were less interested in public safety and more interested in grabbing a new queen rank before anyone else.
They could argue they were keeping a potentially dangerous Esper off the street, can't they?
They might try that, but it's hard to paint you as dangerous. Besides, there are some other complexities in the law that work in your favor here. All they have is the claim that you were in danger, and that, because of it, others were also in danger. But it raises questions of why they were so focused on you instead of the source of the danger. Especially considering they're trying to suggest that danger involved organized crime groups on the night side.
It seemed like a lot of intense political maneuvering was happening, and it made my head hurt thinking about it. Reuben, I know this is a change of subject, but what about my parents? If they've seen these reports and stories, they're probably panicking. I haven't heard from them, and that worries me.
Your folks are fine. I spoke to them this morning.
When?
Before the story broke. I figured they wouldn't want to see it on the news first, and I also thought it might be best to hold off contacting them for now.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I still had so many questions, but I couldn't begin to work out how to frame any of them, especially with my head pounding again. I picked up the data pad with the forms I needed to complete. What happens after I fill these out?
Your position as a protected person is extended, and TPPS will assist in getting you settled here in Cerna. That could look like temporary housing for a while. You'll be assigned a protective agent as well. At least for now.
A bodyguard, basically? I'm going to have to move here?
I imagine that will be the recommendation, yes. There are a few levels of protection, and I can't say for sure which one you'll be placed in. Your case is unusual in several regards, but I imagine it's in your interest to avoid going back to New Albion for the time being. Groups like Endgame, Crimson, or Noir get the most public attention, but they're not the only threat for lone Espers. Under normal circumstances, we'd probably put you in touch with a group like Community Psi, but your case is well beyond what they can handle. Until we can figure out who is behind that attack in Sector 1, our protective services are going to want you well away from New Albion. Endgame overreaches a lot, and how they approached you was a textbook example. However, I am inclined to believe they took that risk because they felt they had to, and that makes me nervous.
So you don't think their statement to the powers that be is a lie?
Not completely, no. That doesn't mean I think they're sharing everything. They never do. But I don't expect they'd go to that extreme under normal circumstances.
Well, that was terrifying.
Even with all that in mind, I don't imagine you'll be placed under our highest level of protection. I imagine you'll be placed in level 2, which means relocation and...
A bodyguard.
Yes. I know it's a lot, but it could benefit you. Cerna's policies for Espers are more lax than New Albion, and since it's still in the Triad, we can rush your permanent residence and maybe even citizenship.
Cerna's legislation doesn't require that I join Endgame?
No one has laws requiring Espers of a certain rank to join Endgame, especially not adults. That's a common misconception.
Oh, really? Well, that's good to know.
And given that you had no idea you were an Esper, it's a known fact Queen ranks will mimic the psi of those around them unconsciously, even that of normal citizens. So it's understandable that you had no idea.
Uh-huh.
You also threw a positive during your psi testing as a child, but then returned negative scores right after. So it's natural, everyone would assume it was a false positive and you'd go on with your life.
Yes, that does seem very reasonable. I mean, it was not the whole story, but okay. I pinched the bridge of my nose trying to keep up. So about this misconception I have about Esper laws?
It's a pretty common one, actually. The law requires registration and training for children. Of course, Endgame conveniently has the only large-scale academy for Psi training on the planet, so children go to Endgame. But the requirement isn't that specific. Technically, children could get training anywhere, if there were other options.
Ah, so that's the loophole Magnus got working in Quill's route. Like, I don't have to change the law, I just need to make more training facilities so that kids stop coming to Endgame. That's clever.
Policies for adults in your situation are even more vague, but it is not law for them to join up.
But I thought...
That doesn't mean they aren't pressured to, and it doesn't mean they aren't sometimes forced to or even manipulated to. And the laws most certainly aren't designed for someone like you. Bear in mind that, until recently, it's been uncommon for someone of high rank to escape detection until adulthood, especially in the Day territories. The Triad's laws are focused on low-level Espers, because those are the ones we tended to have to worry about. There's no legislation targeting specific ranks, ages, or placement. In general, Espers are required to register and receive appropriate training, and dangerous Espers should be taken into custody by Endgame. What's appropriate training? What does it mean to be dangerous? The law doesn't say. So, where do you fit in?
I rubbed my forehead as I let out a slow breath. This is why I didn't become a lawyer. It was too much to think about all at once, but that did seem positive for me? Though vague legislation could also work against me, I thought. But for now, why don't I just get these forms filled out before my head decides to explode again?
Then a doctor.
Right. Doctor. To verify my head isn't going to explode.
To at least get that headache treated. I doubt explosion is a valid concern. Regarding the forms, I think Winter has some parts pre-filled for you, so there's hopefully not too much left. And let's find a room, somewhere quieter. Might be easier on your head if we're not out here in this chaos.
I definitely can agree with that. Thank you.
No problem. And Morgan, it's going to be fine. I really believe that.
I wasn't sure I did, but I would try.
I know it sounds scary, but she said the phoric neuron therapy would work as long as you keep up with the appointments.
She said I have brain damage!
She also said that, because you didn't have a sustained power surge like many awakening Espers, it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
So I'm only lightly brain damaged instead of substantially brain damaged. What a relief. I curled around a sofa pillow, still sulking about the results of that doctor visit. I feel so much like me. Like, okay, so I've got scar tissue. Meh. Well, at least it's treatable. Meh. I was relieved I didn't have to be admitted, and was pleased the pain medication alleviated the headache. I wasn't pleased about having an actual brain injury, even if it was isolated to the phoric system. How do you think it would go if I tried to sue Endgame for giving me brain damage?
I think you would probably lose, though many people would find that lawsuit satisfying. Here, you need to eat something. We'll have a proper meal later, but for now you should eat this.
I took the plate with the toasted bagel sandwich, stomach suddenly protesting that over the last 20 hours all I'd had was a small pastry at Reuben's office earlier.
You look exhausted, so I want you to get some rest after this.
I will. I smiled a little at his gentle nagging. Somehow it didn't surprise me that he hovered like that. Yeah, he's got that mom energy. Reuben, I want to thank you again. I know it's your job, but I don't think you have to go as far as all this for a job. He flushed and looked away as he returned to the kitchen for our tea.
Well, what else was I supposed to do with someone who needed help? Job or not, I couldn't ignore you.
Maybe, I thought. But he could have dumped me elsewhere. Some sort of hotel with bodyguards or something. And instead I was staying at his place where it was more comfortable and felt safer. Being with someone that was trustworthy. That was on my side. That meant a lot. Do you know how long it will take for the forms for the TPPS to be processed?
Given the nature of your case, they may be rushed through. Otherwise, a couple of weeks. Your temporary status will hold out until then.
It's all so complex. It makes me wonder how difficult things are for people who aren't fortunate enough to have a case of this nature.
Having connections helps in most walks of life, Morgan. And having a high-profile case comes with pros and cons.
He joined me on the sofa, setting our cups down on the table.
I hope you realize that, as many people as there are who sympathize with your case, there will be people who think you should be in Endgame's custody as well.
The whole dangerous Esper thing?
Some people believe all Espers are dangerous, and that should supersede the otherwise nebulous laws.
That doesn't seem quite fair.
No, but the law only indicates a clear and present danger, and what that looks like is up to interpretation.
I guess Endgame usually gets to interpret it.
Usually, I guess they do. But often that's because the public isn't aware they're doing it. This time they know. People are going to be debating your case for a while. That's going to be stressful.
And if Endgame thinks the public is on their side...
I won't sugarcoat it. If Endgame thinks they can force the issue, they will. But the more people talk about it, the more they'll learn the law doesn't say what so many assume it does.
Which is that the only adult Espers Endgame is permitted to apprehend are those that are a danger.
To themselves and others.
But what does it mean to be a danger? That was the relevant question to me.
Outside of the clear and present danger clause, you should fall under the registration and appropriate training clause. Training for children is detailed in a more specific way, but it's assumed adults have more control of their abilities.
How does a vague policy like this one get misconstrued as settled law?
The same way any misconception proliferates. The majority doesn't need to know the details, so they accept half-true information without looking into it. Besides, Endgame's chokehold on the Esper community dates back to its creation, and the laws are vague enough they can force the issue most of the time. The fact that there's a natural pipeline from their academy to the organization just cements the idea for people. And it's been like that for decades, centuries. Endgame set up the first Esper Academy on the planet, and everyone was all too eager to send young Espers there for training for everyone's safety. The longer that persisted, the more it was cemented into society that Endgame is the destination.
It's difficult to believe that, in all this time, no one else has stepped up and offered alternatives.
It's not so hard to believe when you think about it. Endgame was already a colossus by the time anyone else was even able to try. Remember, they showed up when the world was in shambles after the Civil War. At that time, no one else could even imagine something like an Esper Academy. And by the time things were rebuilt enough, there was no realistic way to compete. No one will ever be as good as they are. And when you're a parent with a child who's in desperate need of help, you don't question who's helping them. The danger of other factions looking for Espers is another component too. Endgame keeps kids safe. So they go off to learn to control their abilities, and when they graduate, straight to the Endgame forces.
And for adults like me?
For a long time there were no adults like you, not on this side of the planet. Not in significant numbers. We got the identification of N-class Espers down to a science, but the fairy phenomenon is changing that. More and more people like you are surfacing.
I paused for a moment and gave him a long look. You suspect I'm an F-class?
All things considered. Yeah, probably. I mean, queen ranks are difficult to detect anyway. And if you're F-class on top of that...
I stared down at my half-empty plate, mulling that over. Trent suggested that once, too.
Trent?
Oh, my ex-boyfriend. He was studying Esper, so I picked up a few things from him here and there. He was the only other person who knew. Several hundred years of world history wasn't going to change all at once. Not even with a small spark to light up public discourse. Well, give it time, girl. You'd be surprised. I wasn't sure what that meant for me. Is that why people are so eager to make a public show of disapproval at Endgame? Irritation at their monopoly?
For some, that's about how deep it goes. For others, it's different. The discourse isn't really new, and public opinion has been quietly shifting on Espers for a while now. But yeah, many people in the UTG question if it's wise to allow Endgame to maintain their monopoly. Not that people want government funding for Esper academies either. I think there's growing discomfort with labeling Espers a danger just for existing. Something I agree with, by the way.
Ah, maybe that explained his willingness to help me.
But it's no secret public safety officers are unequipped to deal with Esper criminals. Even special investigations. Well, that might be a topic for another time. The point is that there'll be mixed opinions about your situation. But for now, there's just a lot of talk and red tape to deal with. Everyone's opinions can wait. Phil said there's talk about censoring Endgame over terrorizing a new Albion citizen. Endgame hasn't even made a statement yet. That's probably an indication how cautious they're being. I doubt you're the first person they've done this to, but I imagine you threw them for a loop with that teleporting trick. You're lucky you were able to mimic it.
If I was lucky, I wouldn't be an Esper at all. Bleh. I don't think I'm stubborn. Yeah, no, not stubborn. So, flexible. And, I was very lucky to have ended up in your care, so there's that. At least something lucky happened yesterday. I finished with my plate and was going to return it to the kitchen, but Reuben held his hand out for it. Normally I might have protested, but I was already tired and the soreness was returning. I handed it over without argument. If I hadn't ended up here, I wonder what would have happened.
I imagine they would have caught up to you. Or someone other than Jack would have, I suppose. I'd likely have realized something was amiss the next time I reached out to you regarding the New Albion case. We came back to Cerna, but we're heading back to New Albion to follow up in a few days. We only even had a look at the case as a favor, since we happened to be there on another errand and their field office was busy.
I guess that's another lucky thing that happened.
I guess so. If you had vanished, when I tried to follow up, I'd probably have noticed your records were scoured, as I'm sure they would have been. And then I wouldn't have found anything else, most likely. At some point, you'd show up in Endgame like so many others. And by then, it would have been too late.
That's a pretty good summarization of what happens in other routes.
The law may not require it, but as long as you don't question going there when they drag you in. Once you're there, I know it's tough to get out. But none of that's a concern for you right now. All you have to worry about is resting and recovering. I'm not sure how long it'll be before they find you a place to stay. I reckon it'll depend on who they assign to watch over you.
Are you okay with me being here until then? I'm sure it's inconvenient.
Don't worry about that, okay? Listen, you look worn out. Why don't you go try to get some sleep?
Where will you sleep? I know I've taken over your room.
We'll get the sleeping situation sorted out later. Just go lie down for now.
Are you sure?
Just rest for now, okay? I said we'd sort it later.
I was flagging for sure, even though I hadn't done much all day. So I didn't argue further and instead made my way to the bedroom and flopped on the bed. There was so much to consider, so much to take in and sort through. But I was asleep before I could even pretend to attempt it. It would have to be for later. Much, much later.